My mother used to talk to trees, whisper to the rivers, and leave food outside our door at night. Everyone laughed at her until the night little Busi knocked on our door after missing for 2 years. This story is about my mother. People in our village used to call her crazy. They would laugh when she spoke to the wind or left groundnuts on the anthill. But now, the villagers no longer laugh. Something happened. Something that changed everything. Let me tell you what happened. In our village, my mother was known as the strange woman. She wore old clothes, walked barefoot, and always carried a small clay pot on her head. People said she was mad because she talked to herself and sang to the sky. Even the children laughed when she danced in the rain. But to me, she was just Mama. She was my mother. She told me things other mothers didn't tell their children, like how trees can listen, how the wind tells stories, and how sometimes missing children are not really lost, just hidden. I didn't understand then. I just nodded and held her hand when others laughed at her. Then the children started disappearing. One by one, young boys and girls went missing. First it was Kuda from down the road, then Sweet Tapiola from school. People cried and prayed for their children to come back, but nothing helped. Mama would shake her head and say, "Something old is taking the children. Something is angry." I became scared. Everyone told her to stop talking. Even the village chief warned her to stay quiet, but she didn't. She kept placing food on the ground at night. She kept talking to the big baobab tree near the river. And then one day, she told me, "They will come back soon. You'll see." I didn't believe her. It was a quiet night. The moon was full and bright, and Mama had just placed a plate of roasted maize outside the hut. "Why do you do this every night, Mama?" I asked. She looked at me with kind eyes and said, "Because someone is always hungry, even if we can't see them." I shook my head and smiled. Mama was strange. Then we heard a knock on the door. I froze. Knocks at night were never a good thing in our village. But Mama calmly stood up and opened the door. My heart beat like the raindrops in a thunderstorm. Behind the door stood Busi, the same girl who went missing 2 years ago. Her hair was long and wild. Her dress was torn and dirty, but it was her. Mama didn't look surprised. She just smiled and said, "Welcome home." Busi walked in slowly. She looked confused and tired. She didn't say anything. She sat on the mat and fell asleep. That night, I couldn't sleep. In the morning, people gathered outside our hut. Some screamed, some cried, and some just stood and stared. Busi's mother came running and held her daughter tight. "How did she get here?" someone asked. "She came back," Mama said softly. "She followed the smell of maize." People didn't believe her and looked at Mama like she was crazy. I was not surprised. The villagers said maybe Busi ran away and had just found her way back. But Mama just smiled. I started to wonder, was my mother really mad? Or did she know something the rest of us didn't? After Busi came back, people started watching our house. Some came to thank Mama. Others came to stare at her like she was an alien. Mama didn't change. She still left food outside the hut at night. She still talked to the baobab tree. But now, I was watching too. 1 week later, it happened again. Late at night, I heard footsteps. 2 people were walking towards the hut. I sat up, my heart pounding. Mama was already at the door. When she opened it, there stood Tario and Tawanda, the twins who had been missing for months. They looked like they had been walking through the forest for days. Their eyes were wide. Their legs shook. Mama hugged them both and said nothing. This time, people in the village were scared. "How did she bring them back?" someone whispered. "Is she using witchcraft?" another asked. The chief came to our house. He told Mama to stop whatever she was doing. He said it was bringing bad attention to the village. I was both afraid but amazed. Mama always spoke in riddles, and sometimes I wished she wouldn't. That night, she said something I will never forget. She said the children weren't kidnapped by people. They disappeared because no one was paying attention. The village had forgotten something important. Mama chose to listen, speak, and act when no one else would. She honored the forgotten voices, and that's what brought the children back. I didn't know what she meant, but I knew one thing. This was no accident. Mama had done something, and it was working. One day, Mama told me to follow her. We walked down to the big baobab tree by the river. It was old, perhaps the oldest thing in our village. She placed groundnuts at the base and whispered something. I did not hear what she said. Then she turned to me and said, "This tree remembers a lot of things. It has seen things." I laughed. "It's just a tree, Mama." She looked at me. Not all trees are asleep. Some listen, and some even speak. Mama told me that many years ago, this land had been taken from a forgotten people. People had been moved from their homes, but no one had ever apologized to them. The forest remembers, she said, and sometimes it takes what we ignore. That night, she poured water around the tree and said, "We remember you." The next day, another child returned, a boy named Simba. He was older now. He had been missing for nearly 3 years. When asked where he had gone, he said he didn't remember, only that he had followed a soft song through the trees. The villagers were now afraid of Mama. "That woman is talking to spirits. She's dangerous," they whispered. No one could explain why the children were coming back. I started asking myself, what if the tree really did remember? What if Mama had made a promise a long time ago, and now someone or something was listening? After Simba returned, the village was no longer quiet. People argued a lot. Some said Mama was a healer, but others said she was a danger to the village. The chief called a meeting under the mango tree. "This woman is disturbing things that should be left alone," he said. "She is bringing back what was meant to stay hidden." Mama stood up calmly. "I am not forcing anything," she said. "I am only doing what others fear. I listen." The chief pointed a finger at Mama. "If anything bad happens, it will be on you." That night, I saw Mama crying for the first time. She sat outside, beside a small fire, and looked up at the stars. "Why are they so angry?" I wanted to know. Mama smiled sadly, wiping away tears. "People fear what they don't understand. They call it madness." "But you're not mad," I said. She looked at me sadly and smiled. I held Mama's hand. I believed her now. I didn't know how or why, but I knew she was doing something good. Later that night, a cold wind blew through the village. The baobab tree rustled as if there was a storm. Mama stood up and whispered to the wind, "One more, just one more," and then we waited. The next night, the whole village did not sleep. A strange silence had fallen over the village. Even the dogs did not bark. Then, as the moon reached the middle of the sky, there was a soft tapping on our door. It wasn't a knock, it was just a tap. Mama opened the door, and standing behind the door was Moya, the chief's own grandson. He had been missing for nearly 4 years. He looked thinner, older, but he was alive. Mama stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the mat and looked around like he had never seen a hut before. The next morning, the chief himself came running. When he saw Munya, he dropped to his knees and wept. He turned to Mama. "I was wrong," he said quietly. Mama only nodded. Munya was the last child to return. There was calmness in the air, and the wind stopped singing. It was as if something had been satisfied. Mama no longer placed food outside. She still whispered sometimes, but the heaviness in her eyes was gone. People started greeting her and brought gifts. They called her Mbuya Wekudzoka, which means the grandmother of those children who had returned. The village changed. No one laughed at Mama anymore. There were no more whispers behind her back. The children who had come back slowly started to come out and play under the baobab tree. Some didn't speak much, but they smiled. They felt safe. One day, I asked Mama, "Why did the children come back?" She looked at me and said, "Because someone finally listened to the voices in the wind." I didn't understand everything. I didn't know if it was magic, or the tree, or the songs she sang in the dark. But I knew this. My mother was not mad. She was a wise woman. She had a heart that listened to things no one else could hear. Even now, years later, people still talk about what happened. Some still try to explain it, but they always say the same thing, that everything changed when the children came back. And Mama, well, she still sits by the baobab tree with a smile on her face and whispers stories to the wind. And I sit next to her and I also listen. Everyone thought my mother was mad, but because she listened to the voices in the wind, the missing children came home. She didn't need magic or praise, just courage, kindness, and faith. Now our village knows the truth, that sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest answers. And me, I learned from Mama. I will never stop listening to the wind.